It'll turn on and okay. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Popular Music Books in Process series. I'm Francesca Royster, one of the co-organizers of the series, together with Gus Stadler, Antonio Randolph, Kim Mack, Carl Wilson, and Eric Weisbard in absentia. And we're so excited to have this terrific conversation today. You can find our whole calendar on the IASPM website under the Journal of Popular Music Studies tab. And also you can get on the mailing list by contacting me at froyster@depaul.edu and find out about all of our events. You can also catch up on past videos on Eric Weisbard's YouTube page. For example, last week we had a terrific conversation with Mike Gallup and Elliot Powell on the musician as philosopher. Yeah, you can go all the way back to the very beginning in the 2020 or 2021 time period. And then our next session is going to be a week from today on May 6th, where we will be discussing Taylor Swift, the songs, the stars, and the fans. And the editors, and we'll be in conversation with the editors, Krista Bentley, Kate Galloway, and Paula Amber. So I, for one, am always just like fascinated, maybe puzzled by Taylor Swift. So I'm really excited about that conversation coming up. But today we're going to have a really wonderful conversation with the creators of the collection Black Punk Now, Chris Terry, James Spooner, and Dr. Joanna Davis-McElligatt. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about the talk and introduce our presenters. So in this session, co-editors James Spooner and Chris Altieri will discuss Black Punk Now, a literary anthology, and also be in conversation with interview contributor Dr. Joanna Davis-McElligatt about her piece, an illustrated tribute to her deceased brother, Matt Davis, who played a key role in James Spooner's really important 2003 documentary Afropunk. So Black Punk Now was created to give punks, especially Black ones, a wider frame of reference. It shows all the strains, styles, and identities of Black punk that are thriving and gives newcomers to the scene more chances to see themselves. Curated from the perspective of Black writers with connections to the worlds of punk, the collection mixes media, as well as generations, creating a new reference point for music lovers, readers, and historians by capturing the present and looking towards the future. With strong visual elements integrated throughout, the smart, intimate collection is demonstrative of punk by being punk itself. Underground, rebellious, aesthetic, but not static, working to decenter whiteness by prioritizing other perspectives. And so a little bit about our speakers today. Dr. Joanna Davis-McElligatt is an assistant professor of Black literary and cultural studies at the University of North Texas. She is the editor of Narratives of Marginalized Identities in Higher Education and Diaspora, Critical Essays on Edwidge Dandekot. She's at work on her first monograph entitled Black Aliens Navigating Narrative Space-Time in Afro-Diasporic Speculative Fiction, and she lives in Denton, Texas with her partner, son, and 3 cats. James Spooner is an award-winning graphic novelist, filmmaker, and tattoo artist. His debut graphic novel, The High Desert, won the American Library Association's Alex Award and the Cartoonist Studio Prize. Also, Pantheon has recently acquired a second memoir set for publication in 2025. There's also amazing things that James has done that he can tell us about, but I want to just highlight his direction and creation of Afropunk. And he also co-founded the Afropunk Festival, which currently boasts audiences in the hundreds of thousands around the world. Chris Altieri is author of the novels Black Card and Zero Fade, which received accolades from NPR, Kirkus Reviews, and more. with Afropunk founder James Spooner. He's co-editor of the anthology that we're discussing today, Black Punk Now, which was named the best book of 2023 by Pitchfork and The Guardian. Let's see, Terry now lives in LA with his family and teaches creative writing for Emerson College, UCLA Extension, and Goddard College. And I'm going to now turn things over to our amazing guest today. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Joanna, Joe, Dr. Joe, thank you for joining us. It's nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you too. Good to see you, James.
Meet you. Come on. Old friends.
Yeah, good to see you.
You too.
So we were really glad to include you in our book. Your older brother, Matt, was a big part of James's 2003 documentary, Afropunk. And we really appreciated your contribution. That kind of honors Matt, who passed away within a month of the release of the documentary. And we thought it tied together kind of the ethics of punk that we were trying to share in our book. You know, some people think of punk as being like this Sid Vicious nihilism where you're kind of trying to break the world or break yourself. And that's not what we're going for here. We wanted kind of a community-minded progressiveness in our punk. So we put your piece at the end of the book because we thought it tied it all together really well and summed up the ethic. Could you tell us more about writing this piece or making this piece, which is a gorgeous comic?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, about like the ethic of punk. You know, I remember when we were kids, I don't know, I must have been, I don't know, like 18 or 19. And I was telling Matt, like, I don't really think of myself as being punk. You know, I was a dork. That's the first thing you said to me when I met you, James, is that you were not expecting somebody tattooed, because Matt described me as being just a huge nerd, which is actually very accurate and close to the truth. Like I don't want to play any. I did play, I mean, I played shows, whatever. I did go on tour with James a million years ago. But my entry into punk was not through music, but through community, especially with my brothers. And in thinking critically about, you know, what it means, especially to be like the only Black kids around that are kind of into this, what it means to sort of build a community, what it means to be able to inhabit space as yourself aggressively in the world. So I mean, I've drawn. So, oh yeah, sorry, James.
I was going to say it's worth mentioning to those who don't know that you are from like Wichita, Iowa. Like
Iowa.
these
Illinois.
are very like white
Very
spaces.
Yes. Iowa City, Iowa. I mean, I think my mom would always describe when we go back to Wichita, where my dad's family lives, like our faces would be glued to the windows, and you'd be like, "Oh my God, there are so many Black people here." You're like, "Look at all the Black people," because in Iowa City, you know, you just don't see them. So everywhere we went, we were always the only Black kids, and we're kind of weird Black kids, also, you know, into the Smiths or science fiction or you know, being dirtbags, skating, which is not really a kind of, I don't know, coming from my dad, who's like a very traditional type of Black dude, not the way that you inhabit Blackness. But then also being weird Black kids into punk or whatever in Iowa City wasn't easy either. So when I was drawing this comic, I was really thinking about, you know, it's been 20 years since Matt died. Like, what have I retained from him? And I, you know, I was sort of surprised as I was thinking about it that not all of it has to do with the jams you were listening to. Most of it has to do with like this really courageous ethic that he had, which is, you know, kind of even more wild to me since he died at age 26. You know, I'm 20 years older than he was, very nearly, from the time he died. So it's just sort of astonishing to me, like how he could have such clarity of insight, especially about what it means to be a Black kid. You know, like I was thinking also at the end of the documentary, you know, the sort of sign-offs that, you know, notes that Matt never had an opportunity to have like an organic Black community. He died too soon and was still living in Iowa City. And that's definitely something I've been able to achieve for myself. So going back and thinking about Matt's sort of like ability to think of himself as a Black person to desire Black community to took a lot of strength and courage, I think. And so I think that's really where my comic was coming from.
It's the stuff in there feels evergreen. I agree that it's pretty astounding that that's where his head was at,
Yeah.
when he was that young. And it feels like stuff that is still applicable now. I really appreciate how you distilled it in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Especially,
If I can say, you know, I want to just push back a bit. Not, I do think Matt was great, and I obviously included him as a protagonist in the film for a reason. But I would want to push back that it's astounding, on the idea that it's astounding that he would have these kind of ethics and morals and sense of community at such a young age, because we all did in the punk scene, you know. I think that, like, I've actually been meaning to reach out to you, Joe, because just this month I started writing about him for my new book, and I'm revisiting the time, like, when he was the first protagonist that I had chosen for the book, or for the Afropunk documentary. And it was because he represented punk in this way that was very familiar to me. He, like, we were the same age. I saw him as a reflection of like what I would have been had I, like, not stepped away from the scene when I was 19, you know.
Yeah.
Because he was still straight edge, he was still putting on shows, he was still, like, living in a punk house with, you know, a ton of kids and a ton of mice, you
Yeah.
know, and paying, like, and paying rent by, like, selling blood, you know.
Yeah.
And that was the same trajectory that I was on. I, for whatever reason, stepped away and was involved in, like, the New York nightlife. But as soon as at 22, when I started, like, thinking, or 23, when I started thinking about making this film, and reached out to him, or people started talking about, letting me know that he existed. And I wrote to him, and he was, like, you know, sarcastic, and, you know, I mean, it was just like, I was just like, this kid is the embodiment of, like, my lane of punk, right? And really embodied, and what I mean by that, I guess, is the do-it-yourself spirit. So, you know, there's a million and one ways that I could say that Matt is special, and sticks with us. And I think that, speaking of community, the fact that, so, like, a strange coincidence is that I showed Afropunk for the first time in Chicago at the Siskel Center, the same day that he passed away. And almost 100 kids drove down from Iowa City, so much so that to see it, so much so that the Siskel Center did an emergency second screening so that all those kids in Iowa, from Iowa, could come. And the fact that basically the entire scene wanted to see Matt one more time, you know.
Yeah.
And in that same day drove down to Chicago to come to this screening, you know.
Yeah.
It's a testimony to how special he was. But I don't think what makes him special is his connection to the community or his understanding of DIY culture, because that is what punk is about. And he probably learned that, and you probably learned that, and Dan probably learned that, your brother, when you were like 15 or 16 years old.
Yeah,
You know?
definitely. I mean, I think that that's actually a really excellent point. I think that what makes Afropunk still so exciting to watch is seeing all of those people who are like you know, who embody that community, who have that same understanding and that same idea. It really is a magical, life-changing thing. Yeah, I mean, that's true. Like we were planning to go from Chicago, or we were in Normal, and we were going to go from Normal to Chicago to watch the screening. And then, you know, over the night in the morning, he passed away, and, you know, we never made it there, obviously. But of course, like, you know, even especially maybe in the years that after he died, was when I began to get a sense of like the scope of what he had created and maybe what is possible to create from below, DIY, by yourself, with no money, with nothing. You know, because you know, as much as I knew Matt as, I don't know, the lead singer of a band, he was just you know, my big head brother on some level, right? I had no true idea. So seeing that what he was able to create, I guess, is what's amazing to me. But then also what's amazing about punk culture is anybody who gives a fuck can.
Mm-hmm. I was talking about this with my wife last night, that's part of the appeal of punk, is that you can kind of a lot of it is open to interpretation, and you can take it and run with it, and kind of you can make it your own, and that can be, you know, I think a beautiful thing. Like you said,
Absolutely.
with black punk, it can be less beautiful sometimes too. Sometimes right wingers will co-opt it, of course.
Mhm.
But I think that openness to interpretation is one of the real like appeals of it.
Mhm.
Yeah, and the reality is that all three of us are living proof, because in our own ways we took punk, we took we grew up in punk, and at a certain point, I'll speak for myself, and I think you guys can probably chime in and agree in your own ways, that at a certain point I uh was like, okay, the like white liberalism that is existing in this scene, where the conversations around race are either um, I don't see color, or fuck Nazis, you know, it
Mhm.
really like leaves the whole conversation, or it lets a ton of people off the hook, lets all of our friends off the hook, right? And for me, I was fed up to the point of like, I mean, it was like, it felt abusive, you know? So uh, when I made Afropunk, it was not necessarily to say like, you know, I hate my community. It was to say I love my community, and I think, and you guys have taught me, if you've taught me anything, it's that I have the power to change it, you know? And I think that this book is, for me, it was an extension of that, you know? It's 20 years after my first personal attempt to, well, I mean, I was trying to change it in my own ways when I was even a teenager, you know, just doing little vegan stuff, or, you know, putting together little actions, or putting together my own shows that were a reflection of what I wanted punk to be. But I think that uh, you know, this book is once again us saying like, okay, we're headed in the right direction, but we can continue to do better. And and I and if I can applaud punk for anything, it's that um, the members of the community continue to like want to change, you know, are open to change. And you know, the fact um, that we can have a book event in New York City with 8 hardcore bands and 300 black kids come to like mosh their heads off, you know, it's like that didn't exist 20 years ago, you know?
Not even a little bit. I
Yeah.
mean, it was just stultifyingly white. You know, you go to shows and never see, you know, like never see anybody that's not just not white, but anybody, you know, if yeah, I mean, I think what you were saying about it being abusive, James, really rings true for me. It almost makes me wonder what would happen to Matt had he, you know, lived, what choices he would have made. I remember once he was on tour when he came back from tour, it was like his most recent tour. I think it was his first one was mine because they were getting ready to go back out again. And they were in some bumfuck place down south, and there was Nathan Bedford Forrest. I draw that picture, that Nathan Bedford Forrest monument, and wherever they were at. And they were wandering around to get food, and like one of his bandmates was like, "Hey Matt, there's a fried chicken place over here. I know you like fried chicken." And Matt was like, "Yo, like, why that may be true, like, could you have some situational awareness, some common sense, like some sense of who I am and maybe what it means for me to be here, right? Or are you just fucking with me? Maybe you
Yeah.
do know, right? There's sort of inability to be fully intimate in those spaces with people, even people that you feel you really know and love and trust because you're playing all these shows together. Like that horrible ability to surprise you and make you aware of the way that they either don't see that you're Black or that they do and they don't give a shit.
Yeah.
Um, sort of makes me wonder what would have happened eventually, because I think in his wildest dreams, he did not imagine 300 kids, Black kids.
Yeah, I that's something that you mentioned in the with the documentary, and it wasn't obviously my initial reason for picking Matt.
Mhm.
Was clearly not uh, to tell the story of urgency. It was really to tell the story of like solitude.
Mhm.
Like he was the center of. I got the impression that he was the center of the Iowa scene. He's in 5 bands. He was putting on all the shows. He lived in a punk house with 6 other kids. But I knew that there would be like he would still be lonely.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And when I pulled him, when I got him, I gave you the kind of outtakes from an interview that we did in New York. Um, and in that one, he got really vulnerable with me because we were in Brooklyn, we were in Crown Heights.
Mhm.
And I remember him just saying, like, kind of to my surprise, how comfortable he was in this like very Caribbean neighborhood. And um, and I got the impression that, I mean, in the film, he says, I'm going to crisscross across the country, and that's the way that I'm going to like. Um, you can kind of tell he's grasping. Like this is the way that
Mhm.
I'm going to like meet more people, more Black people, or this is how I'll connect. But if we think of ourselves in our 20s, it's like we're all just like trying to figure it out, and he just
Mhm. Very
didn't
messy.
figure he didn't figure it out yet, right?
Yeah.
Um, and as somebody who was the most, of you and your brother Dan, like, I mean, Matt was in a really popular band. He would have been able to tour the country and the world to the extent where I have to imagine at some point he'd be like, all right, Iowa's too small, like, you know,
Absolutely.
like we got to move to Chicago, we got to move to Brooklyn, whatever, like, and he would have found a Black community.
I definitely agree. I think it was inevitable. I think,
And he never saw Afropunk, like not in film, but he
no,
never saw,
absolutely.
he never had the opportunity to play in front of Black people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um,
Absolutely.
and that I think would be, I mean, I'm not a musician, but everyone who's told me that's played those kind of shows were, it was like mind blowing for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I definitely, I think somebody's thing is on. Um,
Michelle, you're
yeah, you need to mute yourself. Yeah, I mean, I was just, I remember right before he died, he's like, well, they were talking to, I don't know, I think they had some like meeting with Rick Ocasek, and we're gonna try to sign a deal and like make dough. And then he was like, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna make my money, and then I'm gonna quit, and I don't know what I'm gonna do, right? Obviously, my
Mm,
parents were like, oh, you're gonna go to college and become a teacher or some shit. And obviously, I don't think that that's what he was gonna do. But I think even then, he was sort of thinking like, I'm gonna need more from my life. At that same time, I was, in my earliest stages of graduate school, back in Iowa City myself, but then making, connections with Black and brown folks in that place at a completely different level,
mhm.
that he was able to access. I think like
Yeah,
the distinction between that is kind of staggering. There's only so far you can go as a Black person in that community, uh,
yeah.
you know.
Can you show your do you have your book right there? Can you show
Yeah,
your pages just so people know like
I
and I'd be
actually, I can share screen. Joe, would you wanna, we're gonna go to questions, I think in like 10 minutes.
sure,
Would you be willing to like do a reading? If
sure,
I,
of course.
yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, and we can do a little book show and tell. This would be perfect. All right.
Also, we started late, so you shouldn't worry about time. I mean,
Okay.
you know,
I am bumping up against something else at 3.
okay.
Hold up.
while we're waiting, I was wondering if you could, Joe, if you could tell us. I didn't know that you were a cartoonist or illustrator or anything. Can you tell us a little bit about your background in making comics?
Yeah, I mean, I am the president of the Comic Study Society. So I've always been reading comics, always since I can never, my earliest memory of reading comic books. And I always drew, but I don't know that it made that I ever connected that I could do that until I got a tablet. Because I mean, I drew everything digitally, and so drawing on paper and pen is so frustrating and tedious and difficult, and somehow having a tablet where I could erase my mistakes and confront them sort of changed my relationship to drawing. I was suddenly interested in it again. But it is extremely difficult. I still don't understand how you drew that entire comic.
It's
So
it's a
technical
it's a
too.
lot, but I
Wow.
also really started to shine when I got an iPad and Procreate, and
Yeah, I mean, it was like,
this drawing on the screen of you was done on that. It's
yeah, it was
just
like mind blowing. Just the ability to erase, or and I also maybe got this idea from a tattoo artist who some years ago said that he was like drawing tattoos on a tablet, and he was like, look at this, like you can do it. I was like, God, it's unreal. Like I didn't even know
yeah.
that thing was existed. I mean, I love to draw. It's difficult, and it kind of uses a different part of my brain than writing does. I guess I would say that Matt and I and our brother Dan were raised by religious missionaries who took a vow of poverty when they were very young. They still don't own anything. They don't own a home. They don't own, maybe they own a car now. Just kind of this weird sectarian order. But I think maybe had a lot to do with like how we were oriented in the world. Our parents are not international missionaries, they're missionaries in the United States, and they live in and work in urban, distressed, extremely poor areas. It's still where they live now. So a lot of our upbringing required us to sort of, I don't want to say perform, but like perform for various folks, you get into a habit of going to a church and you don't know anybody there and you just kind of smile and make nice. It's very alienating and exhausting on some level, but I think that it did maybe, I would say definitely for Matt, make it possible for him to schmooze, for him to like work, to be able to work in that community of people who are kind of nothing like him. So I adopted this weird biblical motif in this. Just
Yeah.
because I think about Matt and our childhood, which a lot of this was about and what he taught me, I sort of think about the ways that the three of us, formed our own pack. We used to call ourselves the Mighty Triumvirate. And just sort of, yeah, navigated the world and like isolated alone with just one another quite a bit.
Chris, can you roll it down so she can?
Sure. So what we have here, every James drew sort of title pages for every single piece in Black Punk now. And here's Dr. Joe's for the 10 Commandments of Black Punk, according to Matt Davis. So every piece has a similar thing with a portrait by James and an answer to a survey question by the contributor. Joe, do you want to read this, or do you want to dive right
Sure,
in?
I'll read it. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I always think about Matt saying in Afropunk like black people plus punk rock equals me. And so that was also sort of formed like a starting place because I did really learn, how to be, this doesn't sound weird, but how to be black with Matt. So black punk means liberation. It means doing things for myself. It means family, it means joy, it means healthy rage, it means radical self-acceptance. Black people plus punk rock equals me. My brother Matt died in 2003. He was 26. At the time, he was touring with his band 10 Grand and had been featured in the documentary Afropunk. Matt had always been the most punk person I've ever known. In his short life, he worked hard to embody the ethos of DIY, of community building, of intentional outsiderism. He was also one of the people who taught me that being Black is not anathema to being punk, that being Black and being punk are the same. Black people plus punk equals me, Matt said in Afropunk. That still rings true for me. These commandments are full of memories, good words, and bits of advice he gave me over the years. I still find it all useful. 1, you can, and when possible should, do it yourself. 2, love your family and your friends zealously. That's a picture of me, our little brother Dan and Matt when we were kids living in Illinois. 3, fight back. Don't let white kids steal your joy. I would say that this is something that was really hard for Matt to learn. He was kind of a passive dude. And I think learning how to not just have thick skin, but to refuse to let white folks, white kids especially, put you in a position to see yourself the way they see you, is something that I learned from him. You know, you have to see yourself the way you actually are. 4, know who you are at every age. It's actually a line from a Cocteau Twins song, but I think it's really true that, you know, Matt, you know, was definitely, even though he died so young, I think I get excited thinking about where he might have wound up. All right, I'll just keep reading. 5, there is no time and God is perfect. So do what you want, what you can with your one life. We all die, but we don't end. Okay, I will say this. Matt was a real weirdo. He was a moon truther. He, you know, he did not believe that man landed on the moon. Like, I don't even know how many times, annoying, but he believed in aliens, and he definitely believed in some, you know, not in, that he was like an internal being. And this is, you know, a facsimile of Matt's gravestone. But I definitely know that he imagined that and knew or believed that when he died, he wouldn't be trapped here. Or he wouldn't be just nothing. He would go on and on. 6, be generous with your love. 7, your Blackness is a gift given to you. No one can have it or take it away. Love your Blackness. 8, things fall apart, so you have to be flexible. Don't get too comfortable. 9, stick to your plan. You can create things only by making them. Can't stop, won't stop, don't stop. And 10, keep it moving.
Thank you, Joanna.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love that last image.
Yeah. You know, and some crappy, probably I-80, I imagine, on their way to Chicago or something, stinky van. But you know, like his, you know, I think that is, you know, always, I'm pretty introverted, you know, I'm an academic for fuck's sake. Like something about seeing him, you know, have the freedom and joy in movement, moving beyond things. It was just, you know, really exciting to watch, thrilling to remember.
Yeah.
I'm
What
really
do you
pleased that you were that you contributed. I wanted you to contribute just as you, and it was a doubly special thing to be able to include Matt in this piece, or in the book in general, for us to talk about Black punk now, 20 years after Afropunk. It personally meant something to me to be able to have Matt still be relevant now, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I fully agree. You know, when he died, you know, you don't really know what his legacy will be, if people will remember him or if they will care, right? And like I said, I didn't really have the strongest sense of even how big of a band 10 Grand was or how important he was in that community. So, you know, even now, still, Dan and I hear from people, my parents, that, you know, like that band slapped and Matt was the best and he was so nice and I really miss him. And so it's completely amazing to hear, you know, since it's been so long.
Yeah.
But I think that's also a testament to like what it means, how important it is to see a Black person doing that, you know, that, you know, for a lot of folks, life changing.
Yeah. before we go to questions, Joe, what are you working on now? Will you tell us more about this monograph?
Yeah, I'm writing a book about Black aliens, aliens who come to Earth and they look Black. So I think an example that a lot of people know about is Brother from Another Planet.
Mhm.
John Sayles film. I'm not writing about that because it's not created by a Black person. So I'm offering a reading of Sun Ra, Octavia Butler's alien novels, her novel Kindred. And I argue that extraterrestrial aliens who look Black and Black terrestrials form this kind of genealogical relation that I call cosmic diaspora. Um, Definitely owe a lot to our childhood, since my dad is kind of a sci-fi nerd and most of the shit we grew up watching was about aliens. So it's been also fun to sort of follow up on this thing that has been sort of a lifelong childhood obsession. Oh, and I just published this book. Boom Splat Comics and Violence, which is an exploration of forms of violence in the comics medium. It's like 15 essays that I co-edited with my friend Jim. So that's out now.
Congratulations.
Yeah, congrats.
Thanks.
What's it like editing as opposed to creating? This is something that James and I have both been kind of experiencing for the last couple of years too.
I think that editing has made me a better creator. This is the third book that I've edited, and getting an opportunity to look at somebody else's prose and gain ideas. Also, the kind of unruliness about it, like you can give people suggestions, but they don't give a fuck. They don't give a fuck. Like they're gonna do what they're gonna do, right? So like, learning patience and also learning like I can guide you here. I want it to do this, but you're maybe not, has been like a lesson in humility also. But I do think like editing over time, especially prose, has made me a much better writer. Like I'm more attentive to the kinds of, I would say this, I'm more attentive to the kinds of things that are fucking annoying. Like I make sure that I follow like style guides and stuff obsessively. But I do think that for the most part, it has made me it is a very different experience, but um a good one, I think. Do y'all like it?
I did. Yeah, I like trying to kind of gain somebody's trust,
Yeah,
to give them
yeah,
a space to create something, because and trusting like they're going to make something that's better than what I could think of, and
yeah.
that's why I want them to be involved.
Right.
Yeah. What do you think, James?
I enjoyed editing the comics. I thought that I was able to shine there,
You did give me great
but
suggestions.
yeah, did I give you suggestions? I don't
Yeah,
know,
you
but,
did. It's a better comic for it.
Those flowers, I think, came from a conversation between y'all.
Yeah,
and me.
absolutely. The final
Yeah.
form looks dope. Yeah.
yeah, so I mean, just marrying words and pictures, I think I'm still probably insecure about writing, as I didn't go to school or anything. So, I'm still learning the style guide, but I've also learned that I don't have to, because I have an editor who will tell me,
Yes. So
you've
that's the key difference, I
misplaced
would say.
600, like, yeah, when I got the first pass of the high desert and there was like almost 900 commas missing, I was like, all right. Like,
That sounds like you got to the
job.
point. They could have just taken out all the comics. I mean, all I'm sorry, all the commas rather. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, they could have really fucked up some commas.
No, that is true. Like when you're editors, you're responsible to make sure it's not fucked up, as opposed to, I don't know, just do it for me.
All right, should we go to some questions?
Yeah, let's take some questions.
All right, so Francesca was asking, I would love to hear you all talk about the choice to do Black Punk now as a book versus a digital form. When I taught it recently, the students' minds were blown that you could do such great things with nonlinear structure, not digitally, or just that non-linearity wasn't just invented. To that I say, I think it is linear. I think it ties together. But maybe there's some under the radar stuff that they're not seeing, or maybe that wasn't fully conveyed. I'm a word nerd. I love books. I think of that as kind of like the ultimate form for expression. So I was always going to be oriented toward doing a book. personally. I wanted something that people could put in their backpack and carry with them and read when they're waiting for the bus, put on the shelf and return to it, leave it on the back of the toilet if need be or desired, you know. And you know, you can't do that with an NFT. You can't do that with a movie. I'm trying to think about what other digital forms there might be. Yeah.
I really
Yeah, I
like
mean,
that because, oh, I'm sorry.
no, please, please.
You're actually the person speaking, but I just wanted to say that there is something about non-digital forms that, you know, once you have it, unless it, you know, falls in the bathtub or disintegrates in some other way, like you have it and you have a certain freedom from the technology that supports other platforms. So I really like that too. And it seems like it kind of fits the DIY ethos in that way. But anyway, yeah. But I would love to hear what you were going to say, James. Sorry.
Oh, I mean, I guess I was just gonna add to that by saying, what I love about this book is that there are all these little bite-sized stories that come from different perspectives in different, like there's a, you know, there's like a script in there. There's you know, layouts that look like zines. There's comics, you know, interviews, regular traditional prose, fiction and nonfiction. So it, you know, I like that it reads like, I don't know, just like a really well packaged zine or something. Like there's no kind of almost like no rules. But then also like my drawings kind of like put it all together, or kind of create some kind of structure. I mean, you know, Chris did a good job of packaging the stories into kind of chapters that made sense. But you know, all of that was kind of like, all right, let's just throw it all in the pot and then we'll figure out like how to present it, you know. And
Yeah.
if we did it as a film or something, you know, there's varieties, but you're still kind of, you can't start in the middle, or I don't know. It seemed like this, I think it's like great to have every form, like let's be represented in every possible way. So
Yeah. And this is the
let's
first
do
book
that.
of its kind. This is the first anthology of writing by and about Black punk rockers. And you know, we were talking about how kind of this book has a lot of breadth. It covers a lot of territory, even within our kind of specific and almost niche definition of punk. But that was a goal of it. We made this book so that Black weirdos, Black punks would have as many chances to see themselves as possible and feel like they had as many options and ways into punk. Because the stuff that we grew up with, like our options were pretty limited. James, Joanna, and I are all around the same age. And there's kind of a running joke among Black punks that like as soon as you say Black punk, people are like, oh, like Bad Brains, who were like an early beloved all Black hardcore band, the first and arguably the best. But there's more to it than that. You know, you don't have to just be Bad Brains. You could also be one of the 30-ish people who are in our book, who are doing things in their own way as well, you know?
Yeah, and one of the things that, as somebody who was never really in a band, I tend to like when the camera turns towards the audience, and which, you know, which is like represented on our cover. And it's like we could have, you know, it's like we could have had like a picture with a dude with a guitar, you know, doing some crazy junk on stage. But to me, the audience is way more interesting, and we wouldn't be a community without the audience. You know, we would just be some band members. So having this focus on the community allowed there to be stories that weren't just like tour stories, you know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's
And
a
it was,
lot of stuff going on at shows too sometimes, like people selling merch, or um people selling their stuff in the back, or I mean there's like a lot of things going on. I've bought a lot of My little brother, I didn't call him little, he's 40, but my younger brother, like, um, like would put on these shows in Wichita, and there would be people selling comics or selling, clothes that they'd made or cool t-shirts, the t-shirt design. Like I still have one of those spray painted t-shirts from Afropunk that you made like 20 years ago, James, that's
I don't even know
cool.
what you're talking about, so you'll
I'll
have to
show
share that
you.
with me.
Yeah. It's old, so yeah, I mean, I think about all the other stuff that goes into it, like it's a whole creative.
Yeah, and just people like living their lives, right? There's
Yeah.
people like breaking up with their partners, and there's
Yeah.
people like, throwing up in a corner, and then there's people like
Mhm.
arguing over like, what brand of veganism is the right brand of veganism. Like
Yeah.
there's
Mhm.
all kinds of stuff happening, and that to me those are the stories that we don't hear when we focus the spotlight on the stage.
Yeah, I mean, someone had to find that space and hold that space for the band. Someone had to promote the show. People had, and yeah, I think of punk is a lifestyle. It isn't just a genre of music, and the music is kind of a way in, and it's a excuse to gather. But it's a place where people can ideally find other like-minded people, and that was really it was. Yeah, I really appreciated that, James, about your approach to this. Even like talking to the different festival organizers, people who are doing different black and brown punk festivals literally around the world now, kind of in the wake of the corporatization of the Afropunk festival. It isn't just about people with guitars. I think that would have got tedious in the book if it was just like a list of bands or something. I'm glad we got to explore other things.
Yeah.
We have a couple other questions. Gustavus was asking, so this is kind of goes along with Francesca's question. How has community building for the Black punk community changed with the transition from analog, as in house shows, touring, record stores, etc., to digital? So I guess thinking about like social media and the internet. And I think that's a really cool thing about the timing of your documentary, James, is that it like internet access was becoming democratized and social media was starting right
The
as
old
your
message board, the Afropunk message board.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, that was everything. Pre social media, just to be able to like go on the website and find other Black weirdos from all over the country, was pretty exciting, and it's something that I again I've been writing about in this month's chapter. It is like about that focus on community. It's like afropunk.com started off as a website about my film with a very active message board, and there wasn't any part of me that was like calculated about that. It was just like, okay, well, I made this movie, now I need to get these kids together, because I go to these shows and there's this long line of people standing in line to like shake my hand and tell me that they're the only one, and I'm like, turn around. Like, turn around and say hi to that person that's also the only one in your town. So and I think that like the way that punk has changed is in the last 20 years is probably paper flyers don't exist as much, which is kind of a shame, but people are able to invite each other via social media or whatever, and and you're able to I think no matter who you are, you don't have to feel lonely. You could be like I'm a Indonesian yo-yo expert living in like Holland, and you could find another one.
Yeah, I think the internet has made things a lot more accessible and kind of democratized that, so it's easier to even get into punk. Even if you're if you're in a more isolated place or if you feel isolated.
Yeah. And then being able, like, when I was able to go online, I write about hearing about Matt Davis, right? Hearing about they were called Vita Blue at the time, and looking them up. And it was before social media. So someone had like taken the time to like figure out the HTML to upload like a 30-second clip of the Vita Blue performing. And I like, hit download, and then I went to the bathroom and like, I made a sandwich, and I came back and the clip was up, and just watching that like 30 seconds was like, holy shit, like I can't tell you, could be like I really was like, he's me, like he's me if I was like and I lived in New York City, so I had access to other Black punks, but I'm sure that I mean, I know for certain that there are people who live in other places who just, having access, just being able to go on Instagram and like find, with 2 keystrokes, be able to find like any, like more bands with Black singers than you'll ever be able to like listen to, and you could get super specific at that point. You could be like, yeah, but I want like a Black trans like Riot Girl who, like whatever. It's like you get as finite as you want and not have to be like, well, I mean, they're homophobic, but they are all Black. So like,
Yeah.
like,
or this band sucks, but I want to like it because they're making me feel seen. Yeah, you can find your kind of music.
Yeah.
We have just a couple of minutes left. How about we do a lightning round of these last
Sure.
2 questions? Antonio was asking, how tied to youth is punk identity? I remember people calling each other kids in the film, as in punk kids, or talk of the kids at the shows. Is punkness grounded in being young? I think that is funny. I've definitely heard some people in their 30s being like, yeah, so all the kids here. And I'm like, we're grown. We're grown. But I think, punk is a youth movement. And it's something that you can carry with you throughout life, and you can kind of grow and change with it. I think even as we're seeing in Joanna's piece here, that some of the knowledge is kind of evergreen and can last for decades.
Yeah, for sure.
I'd say for me, like I remember in 8th grade having this assignment where I had to draw a picture of myself as an adult. And I was like, how could I, like, I could not figure out, because I had a double mohawk and I couldn't figure out like, how do I translate this into being an adult, because there were no adults in the scene. And now there are such a thing as old punks, right? Like my kid goes to shows and it's not weird for there to be like a group of people my age, like in the back or on the stage. Usually we're in the background of the stage, like,
Yeah.
And for that matter, I still call everybody involved in punk a kid. I don't care.
It's just what they are. Just what you're just a punk kid.
Yeah, it's the 7 Seconds song, Young Till I Die. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, my mom would always be like, "What are you gonna do when you get old and you have all these fucking tattoos and like you're still gonna like it then?" I'm like, "I'm still gonna like it then."
Yeah.
So I mean, just like you said, it's a
Badass
lifestyle. It's
tattoos.
like a thing I'm doing with my life. It's not a costume.
Yeah. That leads nicely into the next question. Glenisha is asking, what would you say to someone who is just now getting into punk later in life? Like they didn't grow up going to shows and they're getting into it because of works like Black Punk Now. Hey, thank you. We're doing our job here. So the question, especially someone who is not sure how to fit in, as a late blooming newcomer who was attracted to the scene because of its Blackness. I'd say listen to see what bands you like. Try to go see some bands, try to meet other people who are interested, read some zines, Google the people in our book. We kind of created this book. It's all ages, and we hoped it would be a point of access for people, that they would find something in here that interested them, and it would send them down kind of a Google wormhole. So Glenisha, I hope you can find a kind of point of entry through our book. And it sounds like you already started, and I'm really flattered to hear that.
Yeah, I think that you can, just like the Indonesian yo-yo player in Holland can find their person, like you can find no shortage of people in your age group who are also into it. And when you go to a show, just like hang out in the back. That's where we are.
Yeah. Yeah, I went up front at a Zulu show and 2 people jumped on me at once this fall and I got COVID. So I'm like, yeah, I'm going to the back next time.
And I have to say, as somebody who was never really into getting smashed into or being, I don't want to get, no, I don't get any of your dirt on me or any of your sweat. Like, you can easily go to a show and hang out anywhere you want, I mean, you don't have to, you just go is what I would say.
Yeah.
Go
Yeah.
find a cool one and
You'll be
go.
you'll be welcomed.
Absolutely.
And I think it's about time for us to wind it down. I think the next book we have coming out is called Indonesian Yo-Yo Players in Holland Now. That'll be out 2025. Thank you.
I wanted to actually say, did I hear DePaul? Are we dealing with Chicagoans right now?
Here you are. It's me, but I'm the only one representing DePaul today.
Oh,
But
okay.
yeah,
I was gonna say,
we had you at DePaul.
yeah. I was gonna say because I'm gonna be there on Saturday.
Oh, you are?
Yeah, I'm doing a talk with Damon Locks at the Ramova Theater.
Oh my God. Okay. I will come this Saturday. All right.
Yeah.
That's great. That's great. Yeah. Long time ago I remember you came and did a screening of Afropunk
Yeah, I
way
remember.
back when. So thank you. Thanks for that.
I'll put you on the list.
Yeah, please do. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. This has been a really wonderful, lovely, inspiring conversation. So I'm going to stop the recording.